In today's video, we examine a violent robbery spree that gripped the Black Country for 6 terrifying months. A gang of masked men targeted shops, pubs, post offices, and off-licenses, striking late at night when staff were preparing to close. Armed with machetes, axes, and hammers, they stormed businesses with ruthless speed, threatening workers and stealing cash and goods before disappearing into the night. Their campaign of fear was fueled by a constant supply of stolen vehicles and carefully timed attacks. For months, they seemed unstoppable. But their confidence would eventually lead them into a carefully prepared police trap on Valentine's Day, bringing their reign of terror to an abrupt end. Between August 2021 and February 2022, communities across the West Midlands lived with growing anxiety. Shop workers, many of them women finishing late shifts, feared becoming the gang's next target. The robbers specialized in striking at the most vulnerable moments, just as staff were locking doors, counting tills, and preparing to go home. Within minutes, masked figures would burst through entrances, waving weapons and shouting demands. Victims were left shaken, terrified, and traumatized long after the gang escaped. This was not a sophisticated criminal enterprise built on complex planning or high-tech methods. Instead, it was a relentless series of opportunistic robberies driven by intimidation and violence. The gang relied on speed, surprise, and fear rather than clever strategy. Their targets were chosen for convenience, not prestige. Local pubs, neighborhood stores, and small businesses became repeated victims. At the center of the group was 45-year-old Gavin Riley, who investigators later described as the organizer of the operation. Riley coordinated movements, ensured vehicles were ready, and directed other members before each robbery. Acting like a manager overseeing shifts, he helped plan routes, timings, and escape strategies. His role kept the group functioning with enough structure to carry out repeated crimes across the region. Craig Booth, aged 48, acted as a versatile member of the team. He participated in vehicle thefts, burglaries, and robberies, assisting wherever needed. Investigators would later link him to multiple stolen vehicles used during the spree. His involvement provided manpower and flexibility for different roles during operations. Brothers Stephen Hall, 46, and Jason Hall, 49, served as key enforcers during the robberies. Prosecutors stated that they were often the ones entering premises while armed, confronting staff face-to-face, and issuing threats. Their role placed them at the center of the most frightening moments experienced by victims. CCTV footage frequently captured masked figures matching their builds and movements inside targeted businesses. The youngest member, 29-year-old Carlton Betts, brought a volatile presence to the group. Betts already had a serious criminal background and was linked to a fatal hit-and-run incident in Tipton prior to the robbery spree. Despite facing legal trouble, he continued criminal activity and became involved in vehicle thefts connected to the gang. His willingness to take risks added further instability to an already dangerous operation. Paul Bagnall, aged 38, played a logistical role by sourcing vehicles used during the crimes. Investigators later determined that around 20 cars were stolen and rotated throughout the 6-month spree. Popular models like Ford Fiestas and Ford Focuses were frequently targeted because they blended easily into everyday traffic. The gang relied heavily on this constantly changing pool of vehicles to avoid detection. In one unusual incident, the group even stole a mini digger attached to a trailer. While it was never used in a robbery, the theft highlighted the gang's reckless behavior and disregard for consequences. As months passed, the robberies followed a familiar pattern. Masked offenders would arrive in stolen vehicles, rush inside businesses with weapons raised, and demand money and valuables. Staff were often left frozen in fear as the gang shouted threats and emptied tills. Within minutes, the robbers fled, abandoning vehicles soon after to reduce the risk of being traced. In October 2021, a pub in Stourbridge became one of their early targets. Staff closing for the night were confronted by armed men who forced them to hand over cash and personal belongings. The attack lasted only minutes, but left lasting psychological damage. 2 months later, in December, another violent robbery struck a local venue. By this stage, the gang appeared emboldened by their previous successes. Witnesses described aggressive behavior and terrifying threats delivered at close range. In January 2022, a pub in Lower Gornal was targeted in a similar fashion. The attackers showed confidence and speed, suggesting they believed police were unable to track them. Each successful escape reinforced their sense of control. But by February 2022, that confidence had turned into overconfidence. On Valentine's Day, while many residents celebrated quietly, the gang attempted 2 robberies in one night. Their first target was a post office in Lower Gornal. As before, masked men entered with weapons and demanded cash. However, investigators were already tracking patterns in the gang's behavior. After leaving the post office, the gang drove toward a second target in Brierley Hill, unaware that police units were moving into position. Officers from the West Midlands Police Major Crime Proactive Team had anticipated another strike and were monitoring key locations. When the masked robbers exited the second premises, police acted swiftly. Armed officers intercepted the suspects before they could escape. Stephen and Jason Hall were arrested at the scene, still in possession of weapons and stolen property. The dramatic capture marked the first major breakthrough in the investigation. With 2 key members in custody, detectives accelerated efforts to identify and arrest the remaining suspects. What followed was a detailed investigation combining digital evidence, forensic science, and surveillance analysis. Stolen vehicles became one of the most valuable sources of evidence. Modern cars store telematics data, including GPS movements and journey histories. Investigators downloaded this data from recovered vehicles and mapped routes taken during robbery nights. The digital trails revealed precise movements that matched the timing of multiple crimes. Mobile phone analysis provided another crucial layer of evidence. Cell site data placed suspects' devices near robbery scenes and locations where vehicles were stolen. Communication records helped detectives establish links between members of the group. Forensic teams also recovered DNA evidence from steering wheels, door handles, and discarded items near abandoned vehicles. These samples matched profiles stored in national databases, directly connecting suspects to the crimes. CCTV footage from shops, petrol stations, residential doorbells, and street cameras allowed officers to track stolen cars across towns. By piecing together video timelines, investigators reconstructed the gang's movements before and after robberies. As evidence mounted, coordinated arrests followed. Police executed early morning raids across the region, detaining remaining suspects and seizing clothing, devices, and stolen property linked to the spree. By the time the case reached court, prosecutors had assembled an overwhelming body of evidence. Telematics data, phone tracking, DNA matches, and CCTV footage formed a detailed reconstruction of the gang's activities over 6 months. During proceedings at Wolverhampton Crown Court, the prosecution emphasized the psychological harm inflicted on victims. Shop workers described lasting trauma, anxiety, and fear that continued long after the incidents. Gavin Riley received a 19-year prison sentence for his leadership role in coordinating the robberies and vehicle thefts. Stephen Hall was sentenced to over 15 years, while Jason Hall received nearly 10 years. Craig Booth was given more than 10 years for burglary and robbery offenses. Paul Bagnall received a shorter sentence for his involvement in vehicle theft conspiracies. Carlton Betts, already serving a lengthy sentence for the fatal hit-and-run, received an additional consecutive term for his role in the gang's crimes, extending his time in prison significantly. The sentencing brought closure to a case that had deeply affected communities across the Black Country. What began as a series of fast, violent robberies ended with lengthy prison terms, and a clear message from the courts. The case stands as a reminder that modern investigations rely on far more than eyewitness accounts. Digital footprints, forensic science, and surveillance technology can quietly build a case long before suspects realize they are being watched. For 6 months, this gang relied on masks, stolen cars, and intimidation. In the end, it was data, evidence, and careful police work that brought their actions to justice.